Napoleon then observed that it was strange that a sovereign who by the grace of God was born lord and master of so many millions could not receive a sealed letter. How, said he, can complaints be made to the sovereign of a corrupt or vile minister, if such be the rule? In time of war, if a minister betrays and sells his country, how can it be known to the king if the complaint must go through the hands of the persons complained of, at whose option it will be either to varnish and color it over as best suits his views, or suppress it altogether? Santini continued, he has published a brochure full of trash. There are some truths in it, but everything is exaggerated. There was always enough to exist upon, but not enough for a good table. The 31st gave Napoleon a translation I had made by his desire of a letter which appeared in the Courier newspaper. After reading it, he expressed his opinion that it had been written by the governor himself, and that the seeming incorrectness of one part was only to mask the real author. He then spoke at length about the state of England, observed that it was necessary not to yield too much to the people, or to allow them to think that it were conceded through fear, that perhaps the suspension of the Habeas Corpus Act might for a short time be a proper step, as well as an army kept up to intimidate the canaille. But, said he, I consider these to be only topical applications which, if used without general remedies that should act upon the constitutional disease, might prove repellent and dangerous by driving the complaint to nobler parts. England may be likened to a patient requiring to have his system changed by a course of mercury. The only radical remedy is that which will affect the Constitution, that is to say, relieve the misery which exists. This can only be effected by procuring a vent for your manufactures, and by reduction of expenditure, ministers setting the example themselves by giving up the sinecures. This would contribute essentially to calm the public agitation had the ministers come forward like men at the opening of the session of Parliament and thrown up their sinecures. This, with the example set by the Prince Regent, would have quieted all tumults and complaints. That people in expectation of experiencing something radically beneficial from so good a beginning would have united, and time would have been gained to adopt measures to relieve the general distress. An exclusive commercial treaty for 20 years with the Brazils and Spanish South America might still be demanded with success, or assist the colonies in rendering themselves independent. You will have all their commerce. Or with Spain, if she refused to agree to your demands, would divert the attention of the public, employ soldiers and sailors and a great portion of manufacturers. All your miseries, I maintain, to be owing to the imbecility and ignorance of Lord Castlereagh and his inattention to the real prosperity of his own country. Had Lords Grenville or Wellesley been ambassadors, I am convinced that the interests of England would have been consulted. What would those Englishmen who lived 100 years ago say? If they could rise from their graves, be informed of your glorious successes, cast their eyes upon England, witness her distress, and be informed that in the treaty of peace not a single article for the benefit of England had been stipulated, that on the contrary you had given up conquests and commercial rights necessary to your existence, when Austria gained 10 millions of inhabitants, Russia 8, Prussia 10, Holland, Bavaria, Sardinia, and every other power obtained an increase in territory. Why not England? Who was the main organ of all the success? Instead of establishing a number of independent maritime states, such as Hamburg, Stralsund, Danzig, Genoa, to serve as entrepôts for your manufactures with conditions either secret or otherwise favorable to your commerce, you've basically given up Genoa to the King of Sardinia and united Belgium to Holland. You have rendered yourselves hated by the Italians and Belgians and have done irreparable injury to your trade. For although it is a great point for you that Belgium should be separated from France, it is a serious disadvantage to you that she should be united to Holland. Holland has no manufactories and consequently would have become a depot for yours, from whence a prodigious influx would be kept up on the continent. Now, however, that Belgium has been made a part of Holland, this will naturally prefer taking the manufactures of her subjects to those of a stranger, and all Belgium may be called a manufacturing town. Independent of this, in case of any future war with France, Holland must join the latter through fear of losing the province of Belgium. People always consider the danger that is most imminent. They will reason thus: if we declare war against France, we lose directly Belgium and our manufacturers. If against England, what can she do? Blockade our ports and effect disembarkations. We shall still have the commerce of the continent and shall have time enough to prepare ourselves. We must therefore declare for France. It would have been much better that you should have given it to Austria, or why not have made it an independent country and placed an English prince as sovereign? Now let us see the state you are actually in. You are nearly as effectually shut out from the continent as when I reigned and promulgated the continental system. I ask you, what peace dictated by me, supposing that I had been victorious, could have been worse in its effects for England than the one made by Lord Castlereagh when she was triumphant? The hatred which your ministers bear to me has precipitated them into an abyss. You recollect I told you some time ago that I thought it had policy to leave the English troops in France and make Lord Wellington commander-in-chief. You now see the effect of it. Prussia denies entrance to your merchandise. What can you do? You can either attempt to intimidate or proceed to extremities, as Prussia could fall upon Lord Wellington and his 40,000 men. While you retain your troops in the continent, you will never be independent. Had you, after the grand blow was given, when I was disposed of, withdrawn your troops from the continent, you would have been independent. You would not have drawn the hatred and jealousy of the continental powers, especially in seeing Lord Wellington commander-in-chief, and they never would have dared to shut their ports against you. You could then have sent your ships, blockaded their ports, and have declared, if you do not permit my merchandise to enter, no other shall enter. They won't go in or come out. They would soon have listened to reason. Now your hands are tied. You're meddling in continental affairs and trying to make yourselves a great military power instead of attending to the sea and commerce will yet be your ruin as a nation. You were greatly offended with me for having called you a nation of shopkeepers. Had I meant by this that you were a nation of cowards, you would have had reason to be displeased, even though it were ridiculous and contrary to historical facts. But no thing was ever intended. I meant that you were a nation of merchants, and that all your great riches and all your great resources arose from commerce, which is true. What else constitutes the riches of England? It is not extent of territory or a numerous population. It is not mines of gold, silver, or diamonds. Moreover, no man of sense ought to be ashamed of being called a shopkeeper. But your prince and your ministers appear to wish to change altogether l'esprit of the English, and to render you an other nation, and make you ashamed of your shops and your trade, which have made you what you are, and to sigh after nobility, titles, and crosses, in fact, to assimilate you with the French. What other objects can there be in all those cordons, crosses, and honors which is so profusely showered? You are all nobility now instead of the plain old Englishmen. You are ashamed of yourselves and want to be a nation of nobility. Gentlemen, nothing is to be seen or heard of now in England but Sir John and my lady. All those things did very well with me in France because they were conformable to the spirit of the nation. But believe me, it is contrary both to the spirit and the interest of England. Stick to your ships, your commerce, and counting houses, and leave cordons, crosses, and cavalry uniforms to the continent, and you will prosper. Lord Castlereagh himself was ashamed of your being called a nation of merchants, and frequently said to France that it was a mistaken idea to suppose that England depended upon commerce, or was indebted to it for her riches, and added that it was not by any means necessary to her. How I laughed when I heard of this false pride. He betrayed his country at the peace. I do not mean to say, continued he, laying his hand over his heart, that he did it from here, but he betrayed it by neglecting its interest. He was, in fact, the commis of the Allied sovereigns. Perhaps he wanted to convince them that you were not a nation of merchants by showing clearly that you would not make any advantageous bargain for yourselves by magnanimously giving up everything that nations might cry, oh, how nobly England has behaved. Had he attended to the interests of his own country, had he stipulated for commercial treaties for the independence of some maritime towns, for certain advantages to be secured to England to indemnify her for the waste of blood and the enormous sacrifices she had made, why then, they might have said, what a mercenary people. They are truly a nation of merchants. See what bargains they want to make. And Lord Castlereagh would not have been so well received in the drawing rooms. Talent he may have displayed in some instances, continued the Emperor, and great pertinacity in accomplishing my downfall. But as to acknowledge of or attention to the interests of his own country, he has manifested neither the one nor the other. Probably for 1,000 years, such another opportunity of aggrandizing England will not occur in the position of affairs. Nothing could have been refused to you. But now, after such romantic and unparalleled successes, after having been favored by God and by accidents in the manner you have been, after effecting impossibilities, I may say effecting what the most sanguine mind could never have entertained, the most distant idea of what has England gained? The cordons of the Allied sovereigns for Lord Castlereagh?